And so much has happened since I did the last update, which was in November of last year. We're living in tremendous times, brothers and sisters and young people. And never before in any other age has there been so much angelic activity among the nations of the world, bringing about God's plan and purpose. And we're so encouraged because the things that we've been looking for a generation and a half, 150 years, are coming to pass in our day. And we can be very sure that we do live very close to the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. What I want to look at in the main are things that have happened in Russia, Israel, and also in Britain. So Brexit will form part of this. But I just want to start by looking back 100 years over many of the stepping stones which convince us that we are so close to the coming of the Lord Jesus. It's truly remarkable when you put everything together and you can see the unfolding plan of God. It is truly exciting. So these are stepping stones with dates on them and labels which have got to be attached to them. And the first is taking the language from Revelation chapter 16, the drying up of the river Euphrates, which we saw back in First World War 100 years ago, with Britain, aided by the Australians and New Zealand forces, the Anzac forces, moved up the centre of Palestine, drove back the Turk, and in pushing the Turk back, it enabled the Jews and other nations to come into being in the Middle East. And so that was a very exciting time for our brotherhood. In fact, Britain and Israel are already planning celebrations for the Balfour Declaration, which is 100 years next year, and also the taking of Jerusalem. And in our community there was great rejoicing when these things happened. We could see the hand of God, that God's people could now go back home. Britain had said the Jews can go back and have a homeland there. And in the 20s and 30s and onwards, these Jews scattered from around the world were able to go back and establish a homeland in Palestine, as it was known. And then in 1948, the State of Israel was set up. And again, you read the Christadelphian of the time, you'll see the great rejoicing within the brotherhood, because we saw that this was a tremendous sign. God's people not only have come back to their land, but have established themselves as a state and have chosen the name Israel. Now, you might not know that it wasn't until May the 14th when Ben-Gurion made the declaration that it was known what the state was going to be called. The stamps which were prepared for letters just had to have Hebrew mail on them because they didn't know what the land was going to be called. But Ben-Gurion said, Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. And this was indeed a great excitement. And I suppose the great sign for my generation was in 1967, when at the end of the Six-Day War, the Israelis possessed the whole of Jerusalem. The city had been divided, they had had the modern part, and the Jordan controlled the old part. But in 1967, they took control of the whole city. And again, as you read the Christadelphian articles of that time, it was seen as a great sign because we knew from Scripture that Jerusalem had to be in the hands of the Jews, because Scripture talks about the great coming conflict when Jerusalem is going to be a burdensome stone and Israel's enemies are going to wrest Jerusalem out of the hands of the Jews and in fact destroy Israel as a nation. So before the Lord Jesus could come back, it was necessary that the Jews were in control of Jerusalem. So that was 1967. And during the 1990s and on indeed into the 2000s and now, it is a time of great anti-Semitism. And this has driven Jews to go back to their land. In Europe especially, and in the past few years with the influx of migrants from the Middle East, bringing their Muslim culture and anti-Semitism with them, it has made life very difficult for Jews living in Europe. They feel very unsafe. And this has driven them to go back in increasing numbers back to the land of Israel, so that now we have virtually half the world's Jewish population are living in the land of Israel. Quite a remarkable sign. And today we see Israel making alliances not only with Russia, which is most unexpected, but with countries to the east of her. We should look at the scriptures that speak of this, but this is quite a remarkable sign of the times, that Israel, because of all the problems she has with the EU, with its anti-Semitic background, is turning eastward, not only to Saudi Arabia, but to India, to Japan, to China, and making agreements with them. And we also see the growing prosperity of Israel. Technologically, she is way above the surrounding nations, and now with the vast reserves of gas and oil found not only off her shore but oil on land, we can see the prospect of Israel being exceedingly prosperous. And that's what Scripture told us to expect. Before Christ came, Israel had to be prosperous. So what is yet to happen is a northern power described in Ezekiel 38 and Daniel chapter 11 comes down, takes Egypt, takes Israel, and Israel as a nation, as we know it today, is going to be destroyed. But not for long, because Christ and the saints will already be back in the earth, and they will come when Israel cries out to their God, when they realise that they have trusted in the wrong person, the wrong nation, and they have not trusted in their God, that they will cry out to their God, and the Lord Jesus and the saints will come to save Israel in their hour of trouble and establish God's kingdom upon the earth. Now, all these are to do with Israel, and I've put Brexit up there, and I think Brexit is one of those great signs for today. Sadly, many in this country can't see the significance of Britain choosing to turn her back on the EU. They were very excited in Australia and New Zealand. They thought this was absolutely marvellous. And again, it is a justification of our traditional viewpoint that Britain has an independent role to play. She is not part of the beast system that is opposed to the coming of the Lord Jesus, or the beast system which comes to destroy Israel as a nation, and then after Armageddon will be opposed, Revelation 17, will be opposed to the Lord Jesus as being king. Britain has an independent role. She is going to be on the side of Israel prior to Armageddon, and then will be on the side of the Lord Jesus when Jesus establishes himself as king. So we've always seen that Israel and Britain have roles to play, and Britain is not part of the European system. And so this has been a wonderful sign to us. And we see the great excitement that the prosperity of Britain and the global reach that Britain now wants very much matches what Scripture tells us is the situation for her. So we know that Russia has to come down into Turkey and into the Middle East. But as we have said many times before, we shouldn't be waiting to see that happen before the coming of the Lord Jesus. I believe the Lord Jesus will come back long before the invasion of Turkey and the Middle East. So as far as we're concerned, the return of Christ is the next big event. So let's look at Russia and Israel, this remarkable, strange love affair of Putin and Netanyahu, as this account put it a month ago. Traditionally, Russian leaders are opposed to Jews. Russia is an anti-Semitic country. But, as we've looked at in the past, Putin, because as a young man, brought up in a poor family, both parents going out to work. When he came home from school, there was nobody at home, and his neighbours took him in, and they were Jews, openly Jews, Orthodox Jews, at a time in the middle of communism when it was very dangerous to be a Jew, and yet they were prepared to take in this young man. They had no idea that one day he would be president, but out of the kindness of their heart, they looked after him. And he's never forgotten that kindness. And he has many Jewish friends. And he has made a friend of Netanyahu. Now, there may be underlying and deeper reasons why Putin wants to cultivate a friendship with Israel, and that is because he already has his eyes upon Jerusalem and the wealth that Israel has. Nevertheless, we have this remarkable situation. There is this deep friendship, and that influences his actions today. And so this article went on to say, since August 2015, Netanyahu has travelled to Moscow 4 times for meetings with Putin, more than he's had with any other world leader. During that period, Netanyahu met with the US President Barack Obama just once in November 2015. He has been one more time since September, but it was rather a frosty meeting. Between meetings, Netanyahu has called Putin over the phone at least 10 times to brief, consult and exchange estimates. Probably there were more phone conversations than the Prime Minister's office has announced for the public record. So as well as going 4 times, there have been at least 10 phone conversations between these 2 leaders. And this headline back at the beginning of the year, Putin is the closest thing to a friend Israel has ever had in Moscow. What we have to bear in mind, there are 200,000 Jews still left in Russia, and that 1 in 6 of the Israeli Jews are from Russia, Russian speaking. So there's a tremendous influence of Russian Jews within Israel. And this article, Israel and Russia, BFFS, which I think I've told you before, I had to look up, I didn't know what that meant. Best friends forever. Netanyahu's budding bromance with Putin, that's how the Washington Post put it. And Putin, Netanyahu talk economic ties and energy. Israeli Premier invites Gazprom to develop gas fields. So there's something very interesting in this relationship developing between Russia and Israel. And we have looked at this passage at Prophecy Day, but it bears looking at again. Just turn to it in your Bibles, Isaiah chapter 10. It speaks of God's judgments against the Assyrian, and we go through and get to verse 20, and it's clear when we read verse 20 onwards that we're at a situation which is latter day, a situation which hasn't been fulfilled in the past and therefore clearly stretches down to today. So Isaiah chapter 10 and verse 20, it shall come to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel, and such as are escaped of the house of Jacob, shall no more again stay upon him that smote them, but shall stay upon Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. The remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, unto the mighty God. For though thy people Israel be as the sand of the sea, yet a remnant of them shall return. The consumption decreed shall overflow with righteousness. For the Lord God of hosts shall make a consumption, even determined in the midst of all the land. So it is talking about a remnant, and we take it that this is post-Armageddon, that the Jews are gathered back, those that are not destroyed in the terrible events that lead up to Armageddon. And the critical thing is that they no longer stay, trust upon, rely on the one that smote them, but rely on their God, on Yahweh. So it's telling us that prior to this time of the transformation of Israel, as outlined in Zechariah chapter 12, when they look upon him whom they have pierced and mourn, when they recognise who it is who has come to save them, prior to that transformation of heart, when they turn to God and are faithful and righteous, prior to that, they are trusting, Isaiah tells us, in the one that turns out to be the one that smites them. And we know from Ezekiel 38 and other passages that the one who smites them is none other than Russia. So it's quite remarkable that we have this picture of a Israel prior to their conversion, their saving, that they trust upon Russia. Now, if we just put this into context when a year ago in last May, Netanyahu formed his government just the day before the British government elections. He chose to have a party which was very... I must have knocked out the wrong slide, never mind. There should be some highlights on that, and they're not on that slide, never mind. His party was made up of centre-right Judaism, United Torah Judaism, Shas, which is an ultra-Orthodox party, his own party, Likud, and Jewish Home. These were all parties, Jewish political parties, which very strongly wanted to retain Israel's control over the West Bank. They weren't prepared to give up land. So that gave him his bare minimum of 61 seats out of the 120. But May of this year, he also took in this other party, this ultra-nationalist party, Israel Beteinu, which means our home Israel. So again, emphasising that, they believe that this was their homeland. They didn't want to give it up. Now, this party was built of ex-Soviet leaders. It was a Russian party within Israel. And taking them on gave him another 6 seats, but he had lost one through defection. But it gave him a total of 66 seats, so that increased the majority that he had. But it also strengthened this emphasis that the land, they believed, was theirs to keep and not to give away. But the ultimate prize, the ultimate reason for wanting to take this party on was to take on its leader and its founder, Avigdor Lieberman. He is born in the Soviet Russia. He made Aliyah to Israel when he was 20, so obviously he speaks fluent Russian, knows how the Russian mind works, and is very pro-Russian, admires Putin. And the Russians think that this is a man that we can deal with. And Netanyahu made him the new defence minister. So this has strengthened Netanyahu's hand as far as Russia is concerned. Here is somebody that they can relate to, and I think that we shall see over the coming years a development in the trade between Russia and Israel. We know from Ezekiel 38 that Israel has to be very prosperous as far as wealth is concerned. So this is an update of maps we've looked at over the past 5, 6, 7 years. The Egyptians in their marine territory, the Italians discovered the Zohar gas field, which is a very large gas field. There is Leviathan fairly close to it, and the Americans that drilled Leviathan also discovered Aphrodite, which is in Cyprus territory. So we have this interesting situation that here are 3 wells waiting to be developed. Egypt hasn't got the money to do it. Israel really doesn't have the money to do it. Cyprus certainly doesn't have the money to do it. So they're all looking for partners to come along and help them to develop their gas fields. But in addition, they need to be able to distribute that gas. And so the scheme is that these fields, when they are developed, are linked back to the countries that own them, but then need to go onwards. And the Americans are in favour that a pipeline goes up to Cyprus to link Cyprus on with its Aphrodite and link all 3 together, kind of motorway system for gas, as it were. But the Americans want to extend it into Turkey. The reason for them wanting to extend this gas pipeline into Turkey is that the Americans want to reduce Turkey's dependence upon Russia for its energy. Now, of course, the Russians aren't very happy with that. They're very happy that they supply 60% of Turkey's energy. And as far as the Russians are concerned, they don't want to dilute that influence, that hold that they have on Turkey. So both Israel and Russia favour a much longer pipeline which would take that gas to Greece. Now, it's very interesting how time and time again Greece is becoming more in the headlines and more in the orbit of Russia and Israel. Israel used to be great friends with Turkey. She switched that friendship to Greece. The Russians also used to be very friendly with Turkey, but with incidents of a year ago, that has changed, and they too are wooing the Greeks. So by putting a pipeline to Greece, not only will it benefit Greece, but from Greece, then the surpluses can be sold up into the EU. So that's what Israel and the Russians favour, as opposed to the American route. So we shall just have to see who wins in that battle. Now, off the coast of the Middle East countries, what they call the Levant Basin of Syria and Lebanon, Israel and Gaza and Egypt, are vast reserves of gas. And it is estimated that undiscovered quantities of gas are equivalent to about 20 or 30 more Leviathan fields. Now, Leviathan is a very big gas field. So there's a huge amount of energy waiting to be discovered. Only a bit of it is in Israel's territory. Israel estimates there's about 2,200 billion cubic metres of undiscovered gas, about double what we've discovered to date, and 4 gas fields like Leviathan. Well, Leviathan, if and when it comes on stream, will be all surplus to Israel's requirements. Tamar, at the moment, supplies all the gas that she needs. So Leviathan would be for exporting. She wants to use some of it to supply her Arab neighbours, but to export to earn currency. So we can see the potential that lies off the shore of Israel for vast wealth. In the Dead Sea, they've discovered that one of the existing oil wells, which they thought was nearly dead and exhausted, is far from it. There's about £250 million worth of oil waiting to be extracted without needing any drilling because the well is there. And up in the north, in the Golan Heights, they have discovered oil there. And the interesting thing is that the oil strata which they have discovered is about 10 times thicker than normal. In other words, pointing to a vast amount of oil trapped in these layers. At the moment, exploration has ground to a halt because of environmentalist concerns, because a measure of fracking is needed to extract it. And the environmentalists are very afraid of polluting the water supplies. Very similar situation to this country. One could imagine that if Russia does come down and take over Israel, that environmentalists won't have much say in what Russia wants to do. But, how fascinating that after years and years of Israel seeming so poor in energy reserves, all belonging to neighbours, Arab neighbours, the situation has now turned. She is sitting on vast amounts of energy wealth. And this is where Russia has her role to play, I believe. She seeks bigger Middle East role through alliance with Israel. What initially started as coordination between Russian and Israeli forces to avoid any clash over the Syrian airspace is now expanding into a sort of strategic alliance. Netanyahu and Putin discussed the crisis in Syria and, more importantly, the possibility of Russia's Gazprom developing Israel's Leviathan gas fields in the eastern Mediterranean. As such, were Russia and Israel to strike a deal to develop the Leviathan, it would have enormous geopolitical implications, not only for Iran, but also for Saudi Arabia, Israel and the United States. Needless to say, Russian involvement in Israel would minimise the risk of Iran or Hezbollah attacking these instalments. Israel's interest in taking Gazprom on board, therefore, has clear strategic implications too. It's estimated it's going to cost about $16 billion to develop Leviathan. And there are not many countries or companies who are prepared to sink that amount of money into getting a gas field on course with the possibility that a few well-aimed missiles would just take it all out. But you see, Russia says, well, look, we've got control. We influence Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran. So if we're involved in developing this, we'll make it quite clear that we're not going to stand any nonsense. And one can see the way that Russia has dealt with problems in Syria. She doesn't stand any nonsense at all. So that's the oil. Those who've got good long memories will remember back in 2012 we talked about an electrical cable to link Israel and Cyprus to Greece, the Eurasia Interconnector. And the idea is because Greece and Cyprus and Crete and Israel are slightly different time zones, they have their peak demands for electricity at different times. And the idea is by connecting them with an electrical cable, then current can flow one way or the other according to peak demands. And as Israel is using gas from Tamar to generate electricity, she can feed electricity into this and supply electricity to Greece and on into the EU. Now, this cable is capable of handling 2 billion watts of energy, equivalent of a billion 2 kilowatt kettles. So a lot of electricity can flow to and from. The cable would run on the seabed up to 2 kilometres deep. It's about 1,000 kilometres, 600 odd miles in length. Now the EU has picked up the ball. This was a proposal by Cyprus and Israel to begin with, and then the Greeks took an interest, but now the EU's taken up the ball and they have commissioned a detailed survey of the route which is taking place now. It was put to tender, the tenders have been accepted, or a tender has been accepted. So the next stage is to thoroughly explore the route. The plan is to have this cable linking Israel to Cyprus in place by 2019 and by 2022 to have linked Cyprus to Crete to Greece. Big cost, 1.5 billion euros. But it is an interesting position for Israel to be a country which is an energy giant in her own rights. So what does Scripture tell us about Israel in these last days? Well, we may have looked at this at Prophecy Day. I should have looked back sometime, but never mind. Go back to Isaiah chapter 2. Isaiah chapter 2 is a chapter that we use, the opening verses, to describe to our friends what the kingdom is going to be like, this changed time when people will not be anti-Semitic, but will come to Jerusalem to worship Israel's God. There'll be peace, swords into plowshares, and the law will go to the ends of the earth from Jerusalem. So that's clearly a future prophecy. And as so often happens in these prophecies, when the chapter opens with a future picture, it then gives us the detail of how we attain to that picture. And so from verse 6 to verse 10, or verse 9, it is describing Israel of today. And then from verse 10 to verse 22, it is describing how things happen, warfare, trouble, great earthquake, eventually leads to the situation of nations submitting to Israel's king. So our interest is in those verses 6 to 9, which give a very detailed picture of Israel of today. And so if we just read those verses together. So verse 6 of Isaiah chapter 2. Therefore thou hast forsaken thy people, the house of Jacob. Why? Because they be replenished from the east, and are soothsayers like the Philistines. They please themselves and the children of strangers. Their land is also full of silver and gold, neither is there any end of their treasures. Their land is also full of horses, neither is there any end of their chariots. Their land is also full of idols. They worship the work of their own hands, which their own fingers have made. The mean man boweth down to these idols, and the great man humbleth himself before them. Therefore forgive them not. So it's clear that Israel of today is not dwelling in a state that is pleasing to God. In fact, Ezekiel 38 or chapter 39 tells us that this is a time of trespass in God's eyes, because they're trusting in themselves, what they're doing themselves, rather than trusting in their God. So there's a number of statements there, and all of them we can see are very applicable to Israel today. They are replenished from the east. The word for replenished is not a very good translation, because re means again, to be filled again, and that's not the idea of the word. It's exactly the same word as at the bottom there. The land is also full of. So because they are fulfilled or filled from the east. So it's telling us at this particular time Israel is doing trade with nations to the east of her. And she is being filled with things that are coming from the east, from India, from China, from Japan. She's being filled from the east. Soothsayers like the Philistines. I understand the Philistines were very much like the Assyrians, very keen on knowing what the future held. You know how the Assyrians consulted the liver and prognostications like that. And truly Israel too is very interested in what is going to happen. And Mossad is one of the foremost spy organisations in the world, keeping tabs on what is going on. So trusting in the information, and yes, you can understand from a human point of view, it has saved them many times because they're one step ahead of their enemies. They please themselves and the children of strangers. More modern translations will put to clap the hands, to ally, companions of, friends with. They're friends with children of strangers, non-Jews, Gentiles. They're shaking hands with Gentiles. They're making agreement with Gentiles. And that again is what we see Israel doing with these countries to the east. She's making agreements with Hindus in India, Chinese, Japanese. But they see it as their salvation and a means of prosperity, making these alliances with these children of strangers. The land is also full of silver and gold, neither is there any end of their treasures. I think it's quite interesting that he picks out silver and gold, though obviously that was the currency of the day. But Israel today is very high in electronics, and gold especially plays a big role. Gold plating of internal parts, it plays a big role in electronics. But as far as silver and gold and its normal thinking wealth, they are very wealthy and growing. Neither is there any end of their treasures. Their land is also full of horses, no end of their chariots. Now again, we would say today their land is full of Iron Dome, these incredible tanks and all the different weaponry that they have developed. There's no end to it. It's full of defensive weaponry. Their land is also full of idols. What is an idol? An idol is your substitute for God. It's what you worship instead of worshipping God. And sadly, what the Israelis are worshipping are their own defences. They worship the work of their own hands, that which their own fingers have made. So they built them themselves. And this very largely is the case. They had American money to finance the development of all these military defences that they have got, but they've designed them, they built them, their own hands have made them. And they trust in them. So that when polling organisation, I think it's Pew, once a year or every other year, goes around different countries and say to people, how safe are you in your country? The Jews feel far safer in their country than we do here, or the Americans or the Australians do, which seems incredible to us. When you think of how they are surrounded by their enemies, you'll think they'll be very fearful. But no, they feel secure because of their idols, the things that they have made to defend them. And they all bow down to these idols. They all feel secure in them, from the mean to the great. Therefore, God says, forgive them not, because they're not trusting in him. And that's why terrible things have got to happen to Israel until they're brought to realise they can't trust in these things. And it could well be that working with Russia, which she is planning to do, and having military exercises and all that kind of thing, if Russia learns the secrets that Israel has of how Israel can go into Syria and knock out Russian radar and do what they want and come back and then turn it back on, if the roles are reversed and Russia finds how to defeat Israel's technology, we know that there will be a massive invasion when Russia and Europe combined come far bigger than any Arab attack on Israel. We know that they're going to be overwhelmed. Their forces that they trust in will prove to be valueless. And that's when they turn to their God and cry out for help. So we see this growing relationship between Israel and her Arab neighbours. We've been talking about this for many, many years, but it's been secret, hidden, been behind the scenes. Recent times, it's much more open. And this was a speech which the UK ambassador made, as a Jew, said that while relations had never been better with Egypt and Jordan, several other Sunni-dominated states, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, are now making explicit their support for Israeli-Palestinian reconciliation, he said. So no longer are they saying Israel's a problem, get rid of Israel. They're seeing that the Palestinians are indeed the problem, and they're looking for ways to bring about some solution to the problems between Israel and the Palestinians in order that there can be peace in the region. And that's one of the things that we've been looking for a long time. How can the period of peace that Ezekiel 38 talks about come about? Well, if Russia has established itself in Syria and has made friendships with Israel and the Arab nations are reconciled, then we can see that the great possibility of a time of peace and stability. But back in July, the Egyptian foreign minister went quite openly to Jerusalem. In past times, Israeli leaders had to fly to Cairo and have meetings on planes or be taken in secret to secret locations. This was an open visit. This Egyptian came openly to Israel, to Jerusalem, was warmly received. And Israel is spending a lot of money and time and effort to try and build bridges with the Palestinians. They've given up on Abbas. He's not interested in peace. So they're beginning to work bypassing the leaders, political leaders, and trying to make conditions for the Arabs much better. So these are just some of the headlines this year. Israeli government launches major program to boost investment in Israeli Arab sectors. 5-year plan to integrate Arab population in Israel, a quantum leap forward. A quiet alliance, Jordanian and Israeli cooperation on the increase, and of course Jordan has a very strong influence on the Palestinians. Lieberman's plan for the West Bank. Israel kicks off plan to build 30,000 housing units for the Arab sector. So I just want to look at that Lieberman plan, because this is that Russian defense minister, and he has got his carrots and stick approach. So he did a presentation. There was a map, and various towns and villages were either in green or in red. So he presented his sticks, blows and carrots plan he had consolidated for dealing with the issue of Palestinian terrorism in Judea and Samaria district, what we would call the West Bank. 15 Palestinian villages and towns from which no terrorists had hailed were charted on the map in green and will benefit from a series of immediate alleviations. For example, a master plan for villages in Samaria and for the town of whatever it is will be expanded. An economic corridor will be established between Jericho and Jordan. I can manage those. A western industrial zone will be built for the city of Nablus, and a hospital will be built in the town of Bet Shahor, along with kindergartens and football pitches elsewhere in Samaria. So where there has been quiet, they will receive economic benefits. All of the projects for the benefit of the Palestinians in the villages and areas marked favourably will be established in C zones. Those are the areas which Israel has full control over. Lieberman also presented the 15 red villages and areas from which numerous terrorists hailed over the past year. They will suffer from a security crackdown, according to him. So it's a very simple approach. We'll put money where there has been quiet. The people will benefit. The Palestinians can't enjoy this state of almost open warfare between Israel and themselves, fueled by the Arab leaders. So this is their method. Work with the people, give them the economic benefits so that they'll turn their back on these things. And we have this interesting situation that Mr. Putin is now talking about helping in direct talks between Abbas and Netanyahu. Could Putin make peace between Israel and the Palestinians? Well, we shall have to wait and see. The talks have never been successful in the past because the Abbas hasn't wanted to negotiate, and Arafat before him. And in fact, there's quite a movement among the Arab nations to get rid of Abbas as the leader, because he's not elected. He was elected many years ago, but he shouldn't be in office. He's just clung to power. So again, interesting times in Israel. So these are just some of the headlines of Israel working with China, India, Japan, Arab nations. We had the Egyptian minister coming to Israel. A Saudi delegation was quite open in its visit to Jerusalem. Quite an amazing thing. In addition to that are the strong links, and we've been watching them in the past few years, between Israel and Britain. And again, some more headlines there. Under David Cameron, Israel was chosen as a key market and has had considerable investment, and it's beginning to pay off. There are a number of Israeli companies who are now launching themselves in Britain, British firms taking up Israeli ideas and launching them on the world market, instead of them having to go over to Silicon Valley in America, in California. Much easier, time-wise, time zone-wise, and much closer to home. And it was interesting that Netanyahu calls to congratulate the UK Prime Minister. Israel was very pleased with Brexit because Israel has been very conscious that there are many things that Britain wanted to do and wasn't able to do because she was part of the EU. which was very anti-Israel. Now Britain has indicated she wants to leave, then this opens up new doors in the relationship between Israel and Britain. And what is so interesting is that we have leaders like Theresa May who are very friendly to Israel. So this was his phone call wishing her luck in her new role, and discussing ways in which they can build trade. She went to Israel in 2014. So she's regarded as a friend of Israel. So, Brexit. This is the headlines of the Times the day after the votes were counted, and it was known as a Brexit earthquake. And it truly has proved to be the case, hasn't it? Not only for Britain, but also for the EU. I expect great changes not only from Britain, but I'm expecting great changes within the EU in quite a short period of time. Back in 1973, 43 years ago, Edward Heath took Britain into the common market. There was an element of deceit. 30 years on from political events, the Cabinet Papers are revealed. And so back in 2013, when the papers were revealed, 2013. 2003, wasn't it? Yes, so 13 years ago. It was clear that Heath understood what the EU was about, that it was about political union. And he pleaded with the leaders of, there were only 6 members then, pleaded with the EU leaders not to talk about political union because he knew it would upset the British. And he pleaded with his own cabinet, who had gone and been told what the EU was all about, the EU project was all about. And he pleaded with them, don't talk about it, just talk about trade. That's what Britain's interested in. And so there was an element of deceit that took Britain into the common market, as it was then known, back in January 1973. And there was an element of disbelief within the Brotherhood that Britain had gone in, because we had always seen that Britain had an independent role. What we didn't understand was the timing. And Britain had to go through a further period of humbling within the EU. And for a whole generation, Britain was to suffer at the hands of EU bureaucracy. And so Zion's Watchmen, they wondered at what would happen. And my father didn't start writing milestones until about 6 years after, but in 1981 he wrote this. So although we do not know how it will happen, Britain will separate from Europe. The time will come when the European system will be bound together as the fourth beast of Daniel, to be destroyed by the saints and its body given to the burning flame. In other words, Britain wasn't part of that beast system that comes against Israel. She had her own role. And really it wasn't until about 2011 when the penny really dropped as why Britain had gone in. It wasn't a mistake. It was all part of God's plan and purpose. The time hadn't yet come for Europe to integrate. So Britain was there as the power that would prevent them coming together. So this is what I wrote in 2011. This understanding of Britain's role to come strengthens our understanding that Britain has no lasting role within the EU. Britain's entry into the EEC, as it then was not a mistake. Britain's role was to be the awkward one, who would not allow her fellow members to group together into a political union, because the time had not yet come for that. The time has now come, and we shall expect to see political union going ahead. And we can see exactly the same thing when we look at Russia. Communism was there for a purpose, to hold back the coming together of church and state. For 70 years, communism ruled, suppressed the church. 1991, removed communism, and how rapidly church and state have come together. And I expect to see a similar situation in Europe. So Britain's work in the EU is done. She now has a new role. And there was an interesting comment. This was when I was out in Australia, in the Australian newspaper. This was written by Lord Griffiths, who was the head of the Downing Street Policy Unit under Margaret Thatcher. And he more or less echoes what I had put a few years earlier. Increasingly, over recent years, Britain has been seen as a drag on further integration within the EU. We opted out of the Euro and the Schengen Agreement. Any attempt to create a European army, navy and air force would encounter huge resistance from Britain. Without us, the EU can decide far more quickly to move in the direction in which it wishes to travel. He understands where they want to go. And so, June the 23rd was Britain's opportunity to say which way they wanted things to go. The Leave won. It was a relatively small majority, but there was a very high turnout. When we have European MP elections, I think the turnout is in the lower or upper 20s, but this was 72% turnout. Now, what was so fascinating was precisely at midnight, as June the 23rd dawned, and the following morning and the day the elections would come, there was this terrific thunderstorm in southeast England. They had almost a month's worth of rain from midnight to midday. And that resulted in houses being flooded, trains stopped in their tracks because of the floods, and even polling stations underwater. Now, we'll never know what effect it had on the vote, but it's so interesting that it affected the region around London. And that will be the area where we would expect pro-Remain voters to live, because they were mainly London people, city people, who wanted things status quo to remain the same. But here we had this storm. Now, the interesting thing was it began at midnight, and summer storms almost always hit Britain from the Atlantic. The huge storms smashing the country today, this is from their online issue, so it was a current thing, swept in almost precisely at midnight from the direction of Brussels. Although not unheard of, it is of course very coincidental that the low pressure causing the heavy downpours over Britain today is coming from Europe. Yes, it may be coincidental, but it could well have been the hand of God, and just gave that little tip so that those that might have voted to remain didn't, and so the issue was decided. England and Wales both voted to leave, and Northern Ireland and Scotland voted to remain. What is very interesting is that Scotland has, since the referendum, been jumping up and down and saying we want to remain in Europe. Well, unfortunately for Scotland, she is part of the United Kingdom. Britain joined the EU as a United Kingdom. She has voted to leave as a United Kingdom. And so if they want to remain, they have to reapply. They have to jump through all the hoops. There will be nothing automatic that because you were a member, you can become a member again. And as we can see from this chart, although Scotland represents 32% of the landmass of United Kingdom, she only represents 8% of the vote of the population, and Northern Ireland only 3%. And how interesting that in Ezekiel 38 it talks about the merchants of Tarshish. So it's talking about a grouping of nations. So I would expect to see the United Kingdom remaining as a United Kingdom, 4 different countries, merchant countries, but bound together as the merchants of Tarshish. But what has really scuppered things is the drop in oil revenue. Scotland depends on North Sea oil. Now, back in March 2013, when oil prices were at an all-time high, These were the forecasts that were being made. I don't know whether you can read the writing, but this is going from July the 1st to June the 30th. So in the year 2014-15, it was forecast they would have £6 billion pounds income from oil revenues. In actual fact, in reality, it dropped to 2 billion. The year that's just recently ended, 2015-16, over 4 billion. They got virtually zilch. And the next 2 years, when over 4 billion, it's estimated there will be about £1 billion in deficit. So there's no way she can stand on her feet. Even with those forecasts, it wouldn't have been enough for her to stand on her feet. She's utterly dependent upon subsidies from England. So, June the 23rd, Britain decided to sail away from the continent. It's a long process, and just this week Theresa May has revealed that she's going to trigger Article 50, which is the starting pistol, as it were, in March, and then there's 2 years for all the negotiations. So Bible students rejoiced. They saw this as the hand of God, that Britain now can play her role that they had long foreseen, as an independent power able to determine her own way in life. And following the political bloodbath that followed while I was away, we now have a set of leaders who, as I say, are very pro-Israel. Theresa May's father was a Church of England clergyman. She is a long-standing friend of Israel, and the day before she became Prime Minister, she kept her dinner date with the chief rabbi in London. Boris Johnson, his maternal great-grandfather, was a rabbi from Lithuania. He too is a long-standing friend of Israel, and the Israelis are delighted to have him as our Secretary of State. And I think the city too will fall behind him, because for the 8 years that he was Mayor of London, he had the city's interest at heart and did all that he could to make the city great, and it did prosper under his mayorship. So I think that now the dust is settling and Brexit is going to be a reality, that they will find in Boris Johnson somebody who will support them. And lastly, the person who is involved in Commonwealth matters, Priti Patel, Secretary of State for International Development, she is a Ugandan Indian who was born in this country, so she'll have a natural interest in the Commonwealth and the needs of the Commonwealth. But she's been a long-standing officer of the Conservative Friends of Israel. So quite remarkable. All the three leaders who are involved are friends of Israel. They will build on the Commonwealth links and build on ties to the Middle East and Israel. And these are exciting times. We can now see the role that the Queen has played. The Queen has been instrumental in keeping the Commonwealth together. Without the Queen being head of the Commonwealth and devoting her whole life to binding all these different nations across the globe together, I'm sure the Commonwealth would have disintegrated. But under her leadership, it is very strong. And we can now see the reason. Here are the countries that are going to be the trading partners with Britain. And the Queen made it quite clear that she backed Brexit. She used to say to people who came and had conversations with her, "Give me 3 good reasons why we should remain." And I don't suppose anybody was able to satisfy the Queen with good answers of why Britain should remain. She wanted to leave. She knew that this was Britain's opportunity to develop her independence, to get away from Catholic Europe, to bind herself to the Commonwealth. And what's so remarkable, in Australia, the Prime Minister there, Malcolm Turnbull, is a staunch supporter of Israel. He's got Jewish ancestry on his mother's side. New Zealand Prime Minister John Key, his mother is an Austrian Jewess. The Indian Prime Minister, obviously he's a Hindu, but is a great friend of Israel. And though the former Canadian Prime Minister Harper was an exceedingly great friend of Israel, and it was always seemed a disappointment when he went, but I did just look this up, and Justin Trudeau stresses that they will support Israel. And so we see this remarkable alliance of Commonwealth nations, these are the main Commonwealth nations, as well as Britain, pro the Commonwealth, pro Israel. And so there are at least 27 countries around the world that want to deal with the United Kingdom. 27 countries with a combined GDP of more than 40 trillion. In other words, over 2/3 of the world economy wants to sign trade agreements with the United Kingdom. And that compares with the EU, 12 trillion, just 22% of the world's GDP. So we see the world stretch of Britain. And this is the list of countries. Those are highlighted are the Commonwealth ones. United Kingdom is part of the Young Lion systems together with the other Commonwealth people there. So this is exciting times for Britain, and Theresa May made it clear that she's not going to wait in order to get all the deals sorted out. She's going to get them all sorted out so that when Britain actually does physically leave, everything can drop into place. And in spite of all the naysayers, Britain's economy has boomed. I know travelling abroad is now much more expensive because of the pound dropping, but that has increased exports. That has boosted the FTSE index to record highs, record manufacturing, record employment. And just yesterday, so what a turnaround from all the gloom of those who said, we've got to remain, otherwise it will be absolute disaster. No, Britain has its own role to play. And this was a lovely cartoon in Financial Times last month, article written by Nigel Lawson, who was Margaret Thatcher's Chancellor. Brexit gives us a chance to finish the Thatcher Revolution. I thought the way he put it was brilliant. The British people chose to vote decisively for the UK to leave the EU on political grounds. To put it simply, they chose to become a self-governing democracy. This was perfectly logical, as the EU itself is a political and not an economic project. And the project is to create a full-blooded political union, a federal United States of Europe. There's nothing secret or in any way disreputable about this, but it's not what the British people want. And as Mervyn King, the former Governor-General of the Bank of England, wrote recently, why would you want to be a member of a tennis club if you do not play tennis and indeed actively dislike the game simply in order to play a game of bridge once a month? See, the goalposts are moved. Britain joined to trade. Europe has moved on. She's not very interested in trade. She's signed very few trade agreements. She's put up all sorts of obstacles. And so the club has changed. And so Britain has realised that the expensive contributions to this club, which the annual subscription goes up every year and doesn't deliver what you want. So let's get out. Let's do what we want. And what she wants is to be a global power again. Her future lies not in Europe, but in Israel, Middle East, Commonwealth countries, the rest of the world. So just come now to our last reference, to Isaiah 23. An interesting chapter about Tyre, which was a great city in the time of Isaiah, was a great city in the time of Ezekiel, came to an end, and it talks about the ending of it. But then it seems to be talking about a situation which, again, clearly didn't apply to any situation in the past. And if we just pick up in verse 15, it shall come to pass in that day that Tyre shall be forgotten 70 years, according to the days of one king or one dynasty. After the end of 70 years shall Tyre sing as an harlot, take an harp, sing songs. Verse 17, it shall come to pass after the end of 70 years that Yahweh will visit Tyre and she shall turn to her hire, and shall commit fornication with all the kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth. And her merchandise and her hire shall be holiness to Yahweh. It shall not be treasured nor laid up, for her merchandise shall be for them that dwell before Yahweh, to eat sufficiently and for durable clothing. So it's clear from that last verse that never existed. Tyre did, way back in the time of Solomon, help with the supply of goods for the building of the temple. But, when we come to Isaiah's day, Tyre was a rival power to Israel. So here we have a picture, a latter-day picture, of a Tyre power that is willing to do trade after a period of 70 years of being laid low, of reviving herself and trading with all kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth. And then this wealth is laid up and used in the service of the Lord Jesus. So, can we look back 70 years? And we can. I think if we go back to when World War II ended in 2nd of September 1945, Britain was absolutely battered and bruised and broken. And here we are, 70 years later. She's broken the shackles. She's free to trade with the world. I think that's truly remarkable. And it talked about, according to the days of one king or one dynasty. Now, at the moment, the Queen is 65. She's aged 90, as we know, this year. She celebrated her 90th birthday. She's been Queen for 65 years, longest reigning monarch that Britain's had. And it is not beyond the bounds of reason that she can continue another 5 years and, in fact, complete a 70-year period, giving us a second string to the fulfilment of this. I'm going to be very brief because I hadn't realised. I put some more slides in all this terrible and didn't knock them out. But very briefly, we know Russia is interested in two cities, Constantinople and Jerusalem. One, their religion came from, the Greek Orthodox religion came from Constantinople. Christianity came from Jerusalem. So she has her eyes on those. We have to understand the role of religion in Putin's working, but we'll skip that slide. So that was the situation as it was last November time. Well, that isn't true because she'd already gone into Syria, hadn't she? Yeah. So that was the situation as at the end of September. I gave this talk yesterday at Leamington when I'd done the update in early September before she'd gone in. So, matters not. So, from a year ago, we saw footprints in Syria. We've seen her navy build up off the coast of Syria. We've seen further bases in Syria, in Iran, in Iraq. We saw use of ships from the Caspian firing missiles over into Syria. To the north of Ukraine, an existing base has been developed. In the middle of the year, in Armenia, Russia made a military pact with Armenia, has troops and ammunition in Armenia, all ready to move into Turkey when the need comes. She's also, the last thing I've read she's doing was building again. Footprints should be just a bit further up the map on Russian territory. But you can see just how much Russia is ringing Turkey round with her troops. If we just enlarge, the problem that she has made Crimea her headquarters for her ships, but they have to come through these two very narrow passageways, the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, in order to get here. So what has been so interesting in Debka last week was that she has spending an enormous amount of money in rebuilding what she has in Tarsus in Syria. This port was too small for any of her big ships. She's now enlarging it so that she can take ships up to 870 metres, which is much longer than anything she's got, but it means that several ships can lie side by side. So I'm not going to read all of this, but they've been working 24/7 to expand it, putting in some 100-metre floating piers to extend the ports so that they can get all their things right up to their big aircraft carrier. Spending hundreds of millions of dollars, scheduled for completion by December. Extensive changes. But what it'll mean is she now will have an alternative home for her navy in the Mediterranean. She won't be dependent upon the say of Turkey allowing ships through her waterways. And so she'll be the strongest military naval power in the Mediterranean, and it will shift the centre of gravity. It's shifted down to Crimea. It will now shift to Syria. We can see just how the footsteps of the Russians are moving further and further south. And she will have control of the coast of Syria and is planning to put in other bases there. What she's waiting to do is to get hold of Greece. The EU, as said, will be prepared to sacrifice Greece in order to save other countries. He's waiting in the wings to pick up the pieces. He was there in May. He went to Mount Athos, which is a very sacred site in the Russian and Greek Orthodox Church. Their flag is very similar to the Russian coat of arms. He sat on the bishop's throne there while they sang a mass to him. And what America is worried about is the waning influence of NATO. Here is Greece, who's a NATO member, signing arms deals with Russia. And Turkey is also moving away from NATO, turning it back on NATO, turning to Russia. And here's the French general saying, let's kick NATO out altogether. We don't want America here. Let's make alliances with Russia. So I'm just going to skip over Turkey. What we are waiting for is the nations to come together to form Daniel's image standing on its feet, to come down into the land of Israel, where it will be destroyed and replaced by the little stone power, which will be God's kingdom, which will fill the earth. And so, brothers and sisters, we live in truly remarkable times. We see the angels working in the affairs of the world. We see them working in our own lives. And we know that surely the Lord Jesus is here, almost at the door. And so let's be encouraged. God has given us his word, has given us these prophecies. We see them coming to pass. Truly, we live in amazing times. Thank you.
BibleTruthAndProphecy.com is a worldwide collaboration by Christadelphians to help promote the understanding of God's Word to those who are seeking the truth about the human condition and God's plan and purpose with this earth and with mankind upon it. Bible Truth and Prophecy is part of a wider set of online resources provided by Christadelphianvideo.org for establishing just how far removed the true Christian teaching of the first century apostles is from that taught by mainstream Christendom today. BibleTruthAndProphecy.com is very much a standalone website, but benefits from our vast network of sites and resources and social media. Here are just a few of the things that BibleTruthAndProphecy.com offers. We have a good number of written articles supplied to us from brothers from all over the globe. These deal with first principle issues, creation versus evolution, the inspiration of the Bible, and so much more. We have a whole section of video study series. These are studies that have been posted onto our YouTube channel, but because of the difficulty of the search feature within YouTube, we have chosen to host on Bible Truth and Prophecy. So now every video you search for within the site, you can be guaranteed that it will be of a Christadelphian nature. We also have a preaching video section where any ecclesia is invited to download and use or embed these videos within their own ecclesial websites. We also have an exhortation service where we produce 2 or 3 exhortations per week, which we then circulate to brethren and sisters in isolation. We also have an ever-growing list of approved Christadelphian sites. We also have a page of live news feeds, so you can keep up to date with all the breaking news as it happens. We also have a section for the daily readings. Each day at around midnight we publish all 3 of the daily readings, and then later on in the day we publish thought for the days, often based on all 3 portions of the daily readings. Within each daily reading post there is also a link to enable you to have the Bible chapter read to you directly. We also feature Bible in the News videos which we have produced from the Bible in the News website. We also feature Brother Don Pearce's milestone snippets, which come out approximately 3 times a week. We also feature Andy Walton's weekly World Watch, and other commentaries and analysis from other brethren on world news events. You can also subscribe to the blog and be notified of posts as they happen in real time, and also subscribe to the weekly newsletter which is provided by Christadelphianvideo.org. Every page and post on the site has the facility to be able to leave a comment or make an observation, so please take advantage of this and let us know what you think of the site.